And actually, why don't we kick off? I'm very honoured and excited to have two guests here today, Alexander McCobin, who's CEO of Conscious Capitalism Inc., and I'm Karen Sammon, who's the CCI Board Member and also got many roles apart from CEO of Next 7 Gens. But just very quickly, a little bit about what conscious capitalism is. We know it's good because it creates value. It's based on mutual exchange, and it's noble because it's elevated basically billions of people out of poverty. But as we all know, we're running into serious structural problems with all sorts of issues around social equity and so on. So the 4 tenets of conscious capitalism are here to operate as sort of North Stars for different reasons. Sure, we're here to make money, but there's got to be a deeply ingrained purpose around that. And there are many benefits of that. The healthy culture, servant leadership, and the multi-stakeholder perspective, not just the shareholders, but the whole community with which the business is implanted. Of course, that sounds good, but there are other serious financial reasons why you should also adopt that. Our founding member of Conscious Capitalism, Raj Sisodia, and John Mackey wrote a book, and they profiled a whole bunch of companies and they seriously outperformed the S&P, which is considered by lots of people as the gold standard of investment. So there are many financial reasons. Conscious capitalism is a global movement. We are excited to hear from Alexander today to explain what that means. There are more than 50 chapters globally, and these are some of the organizations that we partner with. In terms of Connecticut, the local movement here, we're a community that's been around since 2016, this chapter. And we are a 2,800 strong group of thought leaders and drivers that see business as a way to elevate humanity. And these are some of the partners that we've been working with over the year. We're a very social organization. We have a very popular podcast series called The Curious Capitalist. This year, again, we're going to be doing the Climate Action Summit. And so we invite you to hear more about that as we go. So let me just do a brief introduction to Karen. Karen Sammon is a CEO and CCI board member. She's known for driving digital transformations and turnarounds that increase business growth, market share, and longevity. She specializes in businesses that are operationally modeled transitions, including from hardware to scalable SaaS. She currently leverages her experience driving digital and cultural transformations as CEO of Next 7 Gens, which is a company she founded to invest in manufacturing and tech services and software platforms that enable and enhance humans and human connection. So welcome, Karen. And Alexander McCobin is, of course, the CEO of Conscious Capitalism. Alexander's entrepreneurial drive led him to start and run several businesses, both profit and non-profit, before joining CCI staff, where he turned that organization into a multi-million-dollar operation. Alexander has been CEO of Conscious Capitalism Inc. since 2007, and I might add, as a fellow diver, kayaker, and cook. So I welcome you all to today to have a really good roundtable conversation about how conscious capitalism can help us rise from the COVID ashes and structure a business environment that's more in line with our human values. So I will, at that point, introduce Karen. I'd love you to introduce yourself, Karen, and just get the ball rolling.
That's great. Glenn, thank you so much, and thanks for having us. It's really great to see the Connecticut chapter. I have the honor and privilege of serving on the Conscious Capitalism Inc. board and calling Alexander a really good friend. So I could not be more happy than to be here to have this conversation and hope that it's interactive. So as we talked about last week or earlier this week, we were talking about this opportunity. You mentioned that Raj Sisodia, who is a professor at Babson College and has authored many books, including Conscious Capitalism with John Mackey, as you mentioned. And he, I'm sure he did a great job of going through the tenets of conscious capitalism and the philosophy. But I thought that I would start by asking Alexander to do a refresh of where we are, to talk about the importance of the 4 pillars of conscious capitalism, and to tell us all about what he's seeing and experiencing with the movement as we're gaining strength. And I think that's a great place to start.
Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Glenn, and everyone for being here. It really is great to see the Connecticut chapter and get to talk with you about the future of the conscious capitalism movement. And what I'll start with is just by reflecting on what happened in 2020 for the movement, because as we all know, it was a tumultuous year, not just for the public health crisis, but the economic crisis that came with it, and a deep soul searching that happened in the world of business at the same time because of all this, actually. At the start of the COVID crisis, there were newspaper outlets calling this an acid test for conscious capitalism. Many of them expected businesses that were using terminology like higher purpose and stakeholder orientation during the good times leading up to 2020 to jettison them as soon as they needed to actually survive and really cut corners and cut costs and find ways to get through that wasn't based on conscious capitalist principles. But what we actually saw over the course of 2020 was businesses who were already on this journey doubling down on their principles in order to get through the challenge of the year, and new businesses jumping on board because they realized that the future of the global economy is a conscious capitalist approach. They may not understand what that means, but they know it's the direction, and they're open to learning about it more than ever before. That doesn't mean that it's been easy. Many businesses in the conscious capitalism movement are struggling now. Many of them have gone out of business, unfortunately. But others are using these principles to find their way through. And even if they're struggling, they're looking at 2021 as an opportunity to grow by focusing on their higher purpose, innovating around how to create value for all of their stakeholders, leading in conscious ways, and developing cultures that really are allowing people to flourish as full human beings in this new world and in this new context. And we've been seeing that at the Conscious Capitalism Inc. level with new businesses coming in, creating new opportunities for people to engage, which we'll get into in a moment. But I actually want to turn the question back to you there, Karen, because you're working with so many businesses directly yourself with your investments and your work and your company that you're CEO of and so forth. And I'm curious what you've seen over the past year from the businesses in your community and that you've been working with. Oh, and you're muted right now, Karen.
That is the phrase of the last 12 months. You're muted, Karen. So thank you. So I think that as we have navigated the last since the pandemic started, and especially since around April, where we really had to make a pivot, I've witnessed some really amazing things related to conscious capitalism. So I'm from upstate New York, and I reside in Utica, which some of you may know. And we are largely manufacturing, government, tech businesses, and we're really part of that Rust Belt. So the pandemic really hit our community pretty hard, like every community. Everybody got hit hard. And what I saw with the conscious capitalist companies that I work with, it was an incredible outpouring, number one, of support for each other. And I saw this through the organization as we moved online and supported each other through different kinds of mastermind and affinity groups where we could talk through the really hard questions and try to work together to solve them, because we weren't going to solve what was happening in the business, but we could lend a hand and lend an ear to how to navigate challenges through the lens of the stakeholder model. So in my community in particular, one of the conscious capitalists operates a brewery, and 40% of his business came from restaurants and hotels, and it was gone. And as he worked through, we actually met recently. They had one of their best years last year, and he attributes it to the fundamentals of conscious capitalism. He made a decision to leverage PPP to keep all his people. They came up with solutions to transition and accelerate the release of different beverages that were unrelated to those that were being sold to restaurants. And they were able to really come together. He believes that by the focus on culture and the conscious culture that he's been working on for so many years, that he was able to solve problems with the unions, and be able to get more creativity out of the people. And he's really done an amazing job of supporting the community. We had another organization that's involved in global transportation, and he hasn't been able to weather the storm as well, because everything outside, there's bottlenecks everywhere, all across the globe. If any of you are in transportation, and then you are familiar with those problems. But he, again, has been able to focus on his stakeholders and working together to find opportunities to move and to shift. He working with the brewery, they were able to locate, there's no bottles that can be found for the brewery, so they were able to pivot to using cans, and he was instrumental in finding the cans for that organization, which then led to partnerships with other conscious capitalists in different parts of the country. So those were really inspiring stories where I've seen the community support each other to come up with creative solutions for how we can elevate each other, and then support each other through hard times. When you open up, and I'm sure that you feel this in your chapter, the check-ins within the conscious capitalism community are deeply intense, and because we create a safe container to have conversations that you might not be able to have other places. We allow and support vulnerability. And then I think that is a real key for leaders in general, but more common with conscious leaders. And so those are some of the examples, but there are many. And I've seen some that have been really tough, where restaurant operators have had to close all their locations, where they've not pivoted to think about how can I stay in this win-win-win orientation? How can I recognize that I'm in my drama triangle and I need to get myself out of it? So I have seen other examples where some leaders have gone other directions and not been open and willing enough to see how we can be supportive of each other. So we're not here to solve all the problems. Like as Alexander said, some businesses and some of my good friends have gone through bankruptcy as a result, but leaning on the principles of conscious capitalism, they have ended up in a spot where they can move forward and continue to be successful.
And Karen, we are good friends, so I know your background, but I'm realizing that we haven't shared really your backstory with everyone here in the Connecticut chapter yet. So could you just share a little bit about your personal journey, and especially how you came to conscious capitalism yourself, and your experience with business and all of this?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So I think that we often talk about the fact that there are unconscious conscious capitalists among us, and we're always searching for all of us to come together. So I've always been I've been a conscious capitalist my whole life, and so I came to conscious capitalism in 2014, and at the time I was running a tech company. Public company, 240 million in revenue. Valuation was really, really soft. It was under 60 million. And we were performing a turnaround. The company was involved in tech for restaurant and retail and hospitality, with the government sector. We had 3 divisions. All 3 were underperforming. And I was running at that time the restaurant hospitality divisions, and we needed to do a turnaround first, which led to doing a transformation. During the turnaround, as any of you know that have been through this, you're right sizing, you are there's the different kinds of layoffs and changing of leadership teams, and setting the pace for the future. And as I was going through this, I was also recognizing that the business that I was leading was being displaced. So it was being disrupted by competition. We were a hardware manufacturer, a systems integrator at the time. We were being displaced by low-cost hardware out of China, Taiwan, South Korea, every place, but where we were doing our assembly and manufacturing in the US. And I also could see that our customers, so we sold to McDonald's and Yum Brands, and I could see that in all the big guys, and I could see that their customers were changing. So as I was looking at how we right-sized the company and thinking about how we were going to transform, it became evident to me that we needed to go from being a hardware systems integrator to a software solutions company. And I had to do some divestitures and got the company on track and made a bet on a cloud-based software platform that we acquired kind of as a Hail Mary. So as I was doing this, I kept talking to my team and thinking a number of different things like, if the people don't, we're a hardware company. If our people don't embrace this change, which I know is going to be incredibly hard and disruptive, then it could be like an organ transplant rejection. And I started looking at really great companies, wondering how they become great. I looked at Wegmans. Maybe some of you may know Wegmans as a Northeast grocer, and I kept wondering, like, how did they become a best place to work, and as opposed to a grocery store? And we worked with Wegmans, and I brought them in, and we talked about how they built their culture, and it led me into a conversation with a peer, Fred LaFranc, who said, I went to this conference in April for Conscious Capitalism. You need to go to the CEO Summit. And I was like, I can't go to the CEO Summit. I don't have the time, and we certainly don't have the money. And convinced me to go. And I arrived in Austin in 2014, and recognized that this was the language, this was the philosophy, these were the pillars that gave language to what I already knew worked. And it also provided me with a network of people outside my traditional network that were going to be able to help me with this transformation from a hardware systems integrator to a software solutions company, not because they knew what the mechanics were going to be like, but because they could support me in working through establishing values that we could all align with, establishing a higher purpose that we could use as our North Star as we navigated all the challenges of a transformation, and establishing clearly who our stakeholders are, so we could work with them so they could understand what we were doing and how we were going to move ourselves from providing hardware and systems integration to bringing a software element and a recurring revenue model to them, and let them work with us through all the ups and downs of building really a brand new business within a business. And it worked. So when I departed in 2019, the business actually in revenues had declined because we had done some divestitures. So we were doing about 225 million. But our valuation was around 600 million, and today it's about 1.5 billion. So we got on the right trajectory. We put the plan in place. My leaders were committed to building teams based on trust and safety. And we were able to move ourselves through the process of transformation. And I'm incredibly proud of the work that we did because 80% of transformations do not work. And I really believe that conscious capitalism as a philosophy, as very strong tenets, was the foundation for our ability to make it through that transformation.
And I just love that story because it's such a good example of conscious capitalism, not just being the right way to do business, about it being a good thing to do, but it also being a profitable way of doing business, a better way of doing business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, it was doing well and doing good are it's both so important. And as you are, you know, every business experiences change, and we're going to be experiencing more and more change. You know, we talk about the importance of trust, and we've been talking about trust nonstop for the last 4 years, because there's such a lack of trust, and there's a lack of trust in government and in business and in all our institutions and organizations. But that foundation of trust and safety will enable employees, all of us, to do exceptionally well. And I, you know, so as we look at conscious capitalism, when we looked at the tenants, you know, we think about how can we look through the lens of the win-win-win orientation, not I win, you lose. How can I win and you win and you win? And that is really probably the fundamental philosophy, or the piece of the philosophy that I think that has been successful for me anyway.
And what you even said at the start of your story, that you've always been a conscious capitalist, is something that I think is worth emphasizing right now, especially as we look to 2021 and beyond, because there are lots of business leaders out there who have been practicing conscious capitalism for years, for decades. Maybe they didn't call it that because they didn't know there was a philosophy that encompassed what they've been doing, or a movement there of other conscious capitalist leaders for them to connect with, but they're out there. And as more businesses and business leaders who are new to these concepts start to become interested in the principles of higher purpose, stakeholder orientation, and so on, they need examples to look to. They need those who have been walking this path for a long time to help show them the way, so they don't reinvent the wheel, or even worse, invent a broken wheel, instead of actually putting these principles into practice, adopting the greenwashing that we saw with the CSR movement, or the broken approaches that have been attempted in other areas. And that really is one of the biggest opportunities for the entire conscious capitalism movement. That's the opportunity that we see at Conscious Capitalism Inc., and for how we're going to serve leaders going forward, and for every chapter in the network, including the Connecticut chapter. How do we identify more of these conscious capitalist leaders and businesses who have been practicing this for a long time, and elevate their stories? How do we use their stories to inspire more business leaders to adopt these practices, and people who aren't in the business world to realize that there are business leaders like this? And how do we better learn their best practices, document that, and share it with other companies, so they're able to put those practices into operation in their own businesses? Again, instead of making it up, or instead of them feeling like we're telling them what they need to do, finger wagging or anything like that, introduce them to their peers, other businesses that they respect, or that they look up to, and say, this has worked at other companies, it can work in yours as well, and provide them with that community of support to help them go about implementing it. And this is a big deal because a decade ago, the concept of conscious capitalism was laughed out of boardrooms. It wasn't given space at conferences. This was a radical idea. The purpose of Conscious Capitalism Inc. in our chapters at that time was to persuade people that this is a better way of doing business, to get them to buy into it. And that's changed. We no longer need to make the case for conscious capitalism anymore, because businesses are coming on board. We now need to transition to educating businesses as to how to put this into practice, and giving them the support structure to go about doing that, which comes from other business leaders, conscious capitalists who've been practicing this for a long time, showing them the way and giving them that support. And we have an incredible foundation and platform to create those connections, to share those practices, and to share those stories to do just that.
Yeah, you're so right. And just kind of reflecting on what you said about it not being accepted in the past. even as I was traveling, on this journey of transformation, I would be talking to my board about the need to, to focus on the culture and all the things that I just described. And they would call it this culture thing. And like, it's not a culture thing, it's culture. And which led me to realize not only do you need to have the right leadership around you, which is absolutely critical for so many reasons, to create momentum and acceleration, you need to have the leaders that have the talent, but also are committed to being a conscious leader, a servant leader, however you want to describe it, to work with, to work with the people, to get the best out of them. But you also need to have a board or advisory board working with you that also is like-minded. So I started to change out board members. So I was definitely not looking for group think, because that is a path to death. But I was looking for the right skill sets, the right networks, but also with the right perspective, that with people who have a conscious capitalism mindset to be able to appreciate how we could outperform our competition. And that was critical, because it took me time, people, and to, as I reflect back on it, I was careful. This is back in 2014, but I was careful of how I was rolling out conscious capitalism, using language that we already knew, and then just releasing it and bringing it forward in pieces that made sense. We were going through a lot of change already, so bringing the language in was something that was important to get us all talking in the same way, but also really intentional. And so we are introducing elements of conscious capitalism piece by piece, and it infiltrated the whole company, and that's the foundation of how we move forward. But I agree with you, Alexander, that as we've moved forward, there's more companies that are looking and are curious about what we're doing. And as I talk to different leaders and I recognize that they are conscious leaders, I am immediately shifting the conversation to incorporate conscious capitalism so we can bring them into the movement, and expand chapters and expand everything that we're doing, because it's gaining such great momentum. I was wondering, Alexander, a little bit about what you see for 2021. And we've been talking a lot about we have a lot going on. We've worked really hard on the strategy for the movement, and it would be great if you, as you sit here in January, to thinking about what the possibilities are for us.
So I'm happy to share that. And of course, when I think back to January a year ago, we had a very different plan for what conscious capitalism was going to do in 2020. And that was thrown out the window, and we're not out of the woods with this pandemic yet. We don't know what it's going to look like a year from now, but I think we have a better sense. And 2020 really was a year that required us to go back to the drawing board and conceptualize the conscious capitalism movement in a different way that is more solid, and that creates a more scalable path for growth that's not reliant on what turned out to be a risky foundation. In that, before 2020, Conscious Capitalism Inc., and as all of you know with chapters, we relied incredibly heavily, almost exclusively, on in-person events to spread these ideas and to support leaders. So when in-person events became impossible in 2020, as an organization, Conscious Capitalism Inc. went back to the drawing boards. We took several months over the summer where we just asked ourselves, what does it really mean to build the conscious capitalism movement? And how can that be done in the digital space? And then when we come back to in-person events, do that there too. And what we started testing out was a two-pronged approach, where we started to pilot a senior leader network, a virtual network for senior leaders at conscious capitalist businesses to come together and support each other with mastermind groups, affinity groups like Karen mentioned, brain trust calls where CEOs can pose a challenge they're facing and get other conscious capitalist CEOs to weigh in from a conscious capitalist perspective, and just be there to support each other, to share these best practices, and from which we can actually gather more of these stories and best practices that we can amplify to the rest of the world, creating so much more content as to what conscious capitalism means in practice than we've ever had before. And because of the success of that pilot last year, this is our strategy for 2021 that we really want to ramp up. We are launching this Senior Leader Network as a new initiative that mid-market senior leaders are able to apply to and join in 2021, where we're going to support them implementing conscious capitalist changes in their businesses and connecting them with one another, and using all of that to create more content to share with the world and inspire people to conscious capitalism, whether that's through videos like you're seeing with our collaboration with Free Think Media. We've released 2 inspirational videos of Javon McCormick at Stride Media and Matt Altman from Sportique that are just powerful and getting tens of thousands of views individually to spread these ideas to new people. Or the virtual gatherings that you're seeing each week, like the one we just had yesterday with Matt Altman, going more in detail into how you find win-win-win solutions in stakeholder orientation. Or articles that really go into what these practices are that companies are implementing, that leaders are able to share with their teams and then follow up with to implement. So our plan for 2021 and the opportunity is for us to bring more of these mid-market senior leaders together who can be an engine and inspiration to power the rest of the movement and create resources and inspiration and opportunities for everyone else to engage. And this is what we're leaning into this year. This is what we're looking to get support for and really offer as a way to build the movement up going forward.
Alexander, there's a question related to what you're talking about the goals for 2021, and you just talked about the Senior Leader Network. Maybe you can talk about how people can join, and maybe a little bit about the chapters and how we're expanding the chapters and supporting the chapters.
Absolutely. So for the Senior Leader Network, because this is still a new project and we have a limited capacity on our team, we actually only have 8 staff. We are capping the founding membership at 150 individuals. We're expecting a little over 100 there. What I'll do is I'll actually share the link for nominations to the Senior Leader Network if there's anyone that you want to nominate to it. But we can't go beyond that right now until we really get the foundation for this set and we can build capacity to really support these leaders in the high quality way that we want to. But by the end of the year, we hope to have that capacity to bring more people in, to bring more leaders in, and really start to scale this up so that down the road, we're not talking about a few hundred leaders, we're talking about a few thousand leaders at influential companies that are making changes and really are setting an example for everyone else. And the way this connects with everything else we do, I mentioned before that this is creating content for us to share with our virtual gatherings and other ways of sharing conscious capitalism from CCI. We see this network as being an engine to support our chapters as well, because this is an opportunity to identify more senior leaders in new communities where we don't have a presence, as well as perhaps in areas where we have chapters, and connect them with chapters to provide local engagement and support. But even beyond that, this is creating a roster of speakers who are interested in and excited to come and talk with chapters and talk with business leaders outside of their own geographic market, because they just care about conscious capitalism and want to spread these ideas. And they're going to begin volunteering to speak around the country and the globe to just share more stories of conscious capitalism in action. And through that, we're really excited to support our existing chapters and create a structure to launch new chapters going forward as well.
That's great. And just for those who may be nominating, there is a contribution. I think that it's an investment of about $5,000.
It's $5,000 per person. And we make clear that being a part of this network is not just about getting best practices and getting support for your own business. Everyone who joins the Senior Leader Network knows that this is also about investing in the conscious capitalism movement, that this is going to be used to support the growth of everything that Conscious Capitalism does, sharing these stories, building up our chapters, and creating the foundation for the rest of the movement.
Yeah. So then another person asked, does the Senior Leader Network include leaders of subject matter experts? So I'm imagining subject matter experts of the Conscious Capitalism Tenants. I may have it wrong, but that's what I'm thinking that they're talking about.
Maybe, actually, since we're here, yeah, Maria, I would love for you to clarify that and just start.
No, I'm sorry. No, I meant, but it was responded. There's like mid-market companies. I was referring to, you mentioned like senior leaders and of big companies. And I represent a lot of smaller operations, and we're trying, and a lot of them that are doing amazing work. And I was wondering if it's also targeted to smaller operations, small and medium-sized companies.
So some smaller companies, senior leaders will be invited to participate, absolutely, especially if we see that the company is on an upward trajectory to really have an influence. The reason that we focus on mid-markets senior leaders in particular is because in our experience, they're at a place where they're ready to really think deeply about these principles and how they infuse them as the company is really scaling. They're beyond just the survival mode phase, and they're in the thriving phase and want to think about how they incorporate these values. And for this network, the feedback we got as we tested this out last year was that the participants really want and need this to be a peer-to-peer network. They're looking for people with a certain amount of experience and expertise that if they bring a challenge to the table, they know they're getting wisdom from others who have been in similar situations or can think that through. And if they're sharing best practices and really spending time mentoring and helping other people, that it's going to have a large ripple effect on other stakeholders. So the focus really is on the mid-market, but like I said, we're going to have some smaller company leaders in here as well, because we know that those are going to be the future mid-market leaders and want to support them on that trajectory too.
There was another question was there a follow-on question? So I don't want to stop that conversation. So Paul Murphy had asked me how I was able to get the company to commit to the principles of conscious capitalism after I left. How do you stop it being watered down? Which is, which I think is a great question, and relates to what Alexander was saying about large companies and adopting conscious capitalism. It's certainly easier to establish your values and your higher purpose and keep it when you're small and you're able to have it as the foundation. In my case, because I was walking into an existing company, I went back to who we were, what was our DNA, and drew our values through our people to be able to bring them to life, and so they could recognize them. They were what they already knew about themselves, and so we interviewed all 1,000 employees were able to contribute to specific questions about what was our DNA, and then as I was leaving, I was able to work with the incoming CEO and actually select that incoming CEO. Knowing that he shared the same values and was a conscious leader, and he had connections with other conscious capitalists as he was coming in, and so he has taken it in his direction, but the seeds were planted, and the company is well on that path to maintaining its foundation of being a conscious company.
And so this really is, this is an open forum. We'd love to get more questions. And if people want to unmute to ask us questions, would love for you to do so. But one thing I'll ask you, Karen, as a follow-up to that question is, what do you think conscious capitalists can do to help other companies that are trying to bring conscious capitalism principles into them right now and really retain them in the future? Especially say everyone here with the chapter in Connecticut, as they meet new business leaders who want to go on this journey, or businesses that are thinking about this, how can they be supportive from your experience as a CEO bringing conscious capitalism into a company?
Well, I would recommend that they join the Senior Leader Network and in time, and that we'll make that available. Alexander, you didn't mention, we are moving from being an events company, but we hopefully will have our CEO summit if COVID permits.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, because it is an incredible, it is the most impactful event that I would attend every year. And except for last year, I've been, attending it since I went to my first one in 2014, and miss it terribly because it was also an investment, but a great use of my time. I came away reinvigorated and full of incredible ideas and new connections. But I also have leveraged the chapters. I think that the path that we're heading down to pull chapters closer together so we can share ideas and support each other is really important. We launched the Syracuse chapter in late February of 2020, so it did not pivot because it was so new. So, but I met a large number of conscious capitalists that are committed to continuing in building the chapter. And within that, when I meet, when I meet conscious leaders who are looking to bring the philosophy into the company, if I work with them directly, then we'll find ways. Where's the entry point? Is it through stakeholders? Is it through the leadership team and building conscious leaders? Is it really defining and developing the higher purpose and values, or culture? And culture's huge. It's obviously near and dear to my heart. And I will recommend others in the community. I had a conscious capitalist send a group of us, we need help on strategy. And so I was able to, listen to what he was looking for and where he was in his journey with his company and in his role as CEO, and make some introductions. So I think that the community is really diverse in terms of the industries that we're in, the size of the business. We've got some amazing consultants that we have certified, and that we can leverage each other to make those connections to help build our own businesses and make them stronger, and also build the community.
I love that. Thank you, Karen.
Yeah.
And I mean, since no one's asking us any questions right now, I'd actually love to turn it around to anyone in the chapter who's willing to answer. Karen and I have been sharing our experiences from 2020 and our perspective of what the future looks like. Be really curious if anyone's willing to share what you're seeing on the ground in Connecticut with the businesses in your area and what the prospects look like for conscious capitalism there in 2021.
So I'll share what happened last year with my business and kind of thinking about conscious capitalism and how it kind of helped me think through the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, I run a manufacturing company, and we were very defensive in protecting our workers and making sure that they were taken care of and meeting on that. And one thing we started to do very early on in April was clean surfaces and wipe them off. And we had like a small product line that did that. We make cleaning products, and but it's more industrial cleaners. And we had this small little product line that we really sold to one company and kept it as a legacy business, but we started using it. And so I was preparing to meet the employees, and I'm sitting there feeling really defensive of like, we're just, what can we do to help the other stakeholders? And I had a former employee call and say, can do you guys have do we have wipes available? A former manager. And I said, he said his church needed wipes and they couldn't buy them at the grocery store. And I said, yeah, I know we've got pallets of them, and you know, call Tina. If you order it, we'll put it on the dock and you can pick some up. So I go, and right after this call, I'm going into this meeting. So I quickly added a slide with our wipe product. And so I'm meeting with the employees and saying, you guys have to stay 6 feet apart. This is 6 feet apart. This is coughing and, you know, dry coughs, fevers. We have to be, you know, it's not a time to brave in and come trudging into work if you're not feeling well. And I got to the end, I said, and we have a chance to help our customers and help them be safe. As we're wiping off our products, we can offer this to our customers that you know, that because they're in the manufacturing business too, and we can help protect them. And so we wrote up an email to promote it to our 400 customers. And I remember I had to be home watching my daughter in the afternoon because her school was closed. And we sent out the email, and within like I got a call from customer service. Oh, we just got a 100-case order, and then a few minutes later another call. We've got 200-case order. We sold out within 2 hours, and then we bought up more supply. We helped start a new operation to create wipes out in Utah with a distributor partner there. And we ended up tripling our business this year. Wow. We ended up shipping to all 50 states, selling to Cintas and Grainger. You know, we ship to Netflix. So if anybody's watching Netflix these days, we, you know, help keep them safe. And one thing that I kept out there was not that, you know, we're making record sales and margin and all that. In fact, I traded margin consistently. If we needed to buy at extra cost, if we needed to ship faster so we could get product out the door, I always paid for it from the business. I didn't pass it along. And initially, and we kept this the whole time, we discounted to get it out there. In the very first meeting, someone said, well, if you believe in it, why don't you discount? And I said, sure, let's do that. So, but the one thing that I kept track of is at the end, we were protecting something like 500,000 manufacturing and workers and workers for a 3-month period with the millions and millions of wipes that we sent out. And so, but I think what helped navigate is having a multi-stakeholder approach. And I remember talking to somebody from the state, and they were like, you know, and we ended up getting some state funding to help it happen too. And they said, you know, you're one of the few businesses that are, you know, being proactive at this early stage. This was April and May. So that's something that we did to kind of navigate the pandemic. And in the future, I think the future, you know, for our business, it's set us up well with very strong relationships where we were there for people when they needed it. And so our future looks very good.
David, that's an awesome story. Thank you for sharing that. How has it influenced your business in 2021, and how has it shaped your relationship with your employees? Out of curiosity.
So with employees, I say the trust level is at an all-time high. And we acquired this business about 6 years ago. And so I would say, because we took the pandemic very serious, and they see us trying to help others, I would say that morale and in general trust is at all-time high. And yeah, it set us up really well for this year. We've got new customers. We have you know, a strong business. So I think we're set up for a good year this year as well.
Please feel free, David, to drop your link into the chat for the business so people can see the product to see what it looks like if you want to.
Paul,
sorry.
Yeah, good. I was going to say, do you want to talk about what was like the first few days in your company, the first few days of the
Sure,
pandemic?
and I had a question, so I'll get to the question. I left the company I worked for back in May. It was a planned departure. I planned it before COVID, about a week before COVID. Great timing. But they had asked me to stay through May. The manufacturing company in Shelton, Connecticut. We were fortunate because we had done a lot of work over the years from a lean manufacturing perspective and from an employee engagement perspective. So I think that we were very well set up going into COVID in terms of the trust level that we'd already garnered. I think that when it happened, we were very front and center with our employees in terms of what was going on, what it meant, what kind of reaction we were looking from our folks, and where our priorities were in terms of safety. And I think that really helped them understand the seriousness of the situation without panicking. And we gave them a lot of options in terms of, for those who could work from home. We had just moved into a second building, an expansion, so it gave us extra space that allowed us to move operations further apart. The real heroes for us were our team leads. They were the folks who had built up a tremendous amount of, we'll call it trust capital within their teams because of the way we did engagement. And they were able to communicate very effectively in terms of what was going on and where we needed to do some extra communication. They were very clear about who they needed out there and what they needed or what questions there were. So we were able to get on top of things very, very quickly. In terms of questions, I noticed that there's a common thread here that's going through from Karen to David's and Alexander's comments in terms of the last year, which is that we sort of aspire and inspire and then pivot when we're faced with a brick wall or some sort of major crisis. You know, if you didn't have that major crisis in front of you that you could see, I know from Karen's perspective, it wasn't COVID, but you could see the writing on the wall in terms of where the company was going. And because of that, and then because of the agility of the organization through conscious capitalism, you were able to make a successful pivot. I always wonder why or how we can make that just part of our business, where instead of, if there's no crises in 2021, how do we, from a conscious capitalism perspective, find or embed in our culture this desire to find points of pivot that will actually pivot the business forward and upward, as opposed to just reaping the rewards of past successes. You know, it's imagine what we could do if we moved before the cheese moved.
Yeah, that is precisely why I founded Next 7 Gens, because I walked into a business that I remember one of my first conversations with the board was, when was complacency okay? When did you guys decide that mediocrity was good? Because this feels really terrible to me. And mid-market companies, I think there's a lot of us that are founder owned that have moved into a comfort zone, and the world is moving so quickly because of technology, whether you like it or not. The fourth industrial revolution is here. And I think that creates a lot of fear with employees, especially in manufacturers. Like, am I going to be displaced by robots? Am I going to be displaced by artificial intelligence or robot? Whatever, I said robots, but you know, that's where safety through upskilling is really important. I knew in my organization I had like 3 groups of people generally: those who weren't going to make it, and how was I going to be able to exit them with dignity and with the soft landing as possible. The second group is the upskill group that could make it. And then, because I was moving toward this software as a service, hosted software world, those types of engineers and bringing them in, and they were going to clash with the manufacturing people. Our company was through and through manufacturing. Our benefits, our compensation, everything was tied, our infrastructure, everything was manufacturing. So the clash was inevitable. And so it was recognizing that up front. And to your point, Paul, there's like the evolution of a company, the Adizes model, you may be familiar with it, where prime is not at the top of the bell curve. Prime is on the left-hand side of the curve. And you better be reinventing and thinking about change before you get to that prime. So the other side of the curve on the right-hand side is bureaucracy and then ultimately death of the corporation. And in my case, we were on the right-hand side and we had to sweep it around and to reinvent the company. It's much easier to do if you're thinking about it on the left-hand side as you are thinking about where your company is going to go and how you're going to introduce change. And that those companies that I think it was David that just mentioned it. How many times I heard trust mentioned, and you mentioned it as well, because you felt safe in your environment. You felt like you could trust management, or you are management. your employees trusted you. And with that, then, you can do incredible things, and people will do incredible things when they feel trusted. Now let's put it in here, the Adizes model.
Yeah, I like that, Karen. I like what you're saying earlier about the conscious capitalism community and how we support vulnerability. And I'll use one of Eleanor's quotes here about the artist communities, because, artists often, when they experience a crisis of some sort, they use that, they convert that into a creative piece of some sort. And I'm hoping that we as a community can take that as a best practice, if you like, and really use the COVID as an opportunity to reinforce the conscious principles in ways that make them more survivable and more purposeful, and just contribute more holistically to the health of the community overall. So I really enjoyed the conversation between Alexander and Karen and their case studies, and it was really good to hear from some of our community. And I so enjoyed the space that we created for that today, and I'm so grateful for your time to share that. I will also take a moment to share our next event, and this is part of the sort of youth mentor series. We realize that our young leaders have not only bright ideas, but they also have a longer runway to execute those ideas. And we worked with an organization last year called Narrative 4. They're a global youth-orientated company that have a variety of products that help people empathize. And that, I think, is one of our biggest challenges as a country, to have a little more of that. So our next event on Thursday, the 4th of February is bringing Narrative 4 back into the room. They're a global organization, and they're going to be demonstrating some of their empathy tools. And I think as the adults in the room, we could all enjoy a bit more of that. Particularly, I mean, my favorite method of learning empathy was to travel. And of course, that's something that we can't do at the moment too. So I just wanted to mention that to you as our next event coming up. And I, being all conscious of your time, I just wanted to thank Alexander McCobin again for sharing your big ideas. Karen Sammon, who's an active participant and principal and executor in this field, and board members and others that had contributions today. It's been a really good conversation, and thanks for coming.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much, everyone, for all that you're doing.